Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show of Sean Unboxing. So it's time for me to educate casual fans that are just stupid and narrative driven. So I'm going back to 1990 and the pound for pound list. 1990. So 2000, 2010, 2020, 2025. So that's literally 35 years ago. 35 years ago, I'm using a pound for pound list from then. And I just picked a random pound for pound list back in the day. No specific point to anything. I just know that Ring Magazine didn't do pound for pound lists before a certain time. So I went back to 1990 figuring they probably did do it then. And it would be a good shot that I could use that pound for pound list for this video. So let's take a look at it. So this is the pound for pound list in 1990. Julio Cesar Chavez, number 1. Pernell Whitaker, number 2. Obviously, this was prior to Whitaker and Chavez fighting. Michael Nunn, number 3. Antonio Esperangoza, number 4. Meldrick Taylor, number 5. Evander Holyfield, number 6. Mike Tyson, number 7. Raul Perez, number 8. Myung Woo Gyu, number 9. And Kosei Galaxy, number 10. Right? So, of course, John would love this list because you do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black fighters out of the top 10 on the list. So that's pretty impressive. 10 black fighters on the list. But then you also have 1, 2 fighters from Asia, 1 from Korea, and 1 from Thailand. You also had Mexican, even though I think Raul Perez, I'm not sure if he was Mexican-American or Mexican. I might be mixing him up with a different... I think this Raul Perez was Mexican. And then, of course, Antonio Esperangoza, Mexican. And, of course, Julio Cesar Chavez, Mexican. So 3 Mexicans, 2 Asians, and 5 black American fighters. But what you notice about this list is what you notice all the time. Smaller weight fighters did get recognized. Smaller weight fighters were on the pound for pound list, right? People try to ignore them and downplay these fighters now, like somehow this is unusual, something that historically wasn't done by Ring Magazine. But 35 years ago, Ring Magazine was doing the exact same thing they do now. They were giving credit to small weight fighters who Americans didn't know. Americans didn't know who Kosei Galaxy was. As a kid, I remember Kosei Galaxy, and the biggest thing I wanted to do was get to see this guy fight. Of course, I didn't get to see him fight till years later when his videos were on YouTube. Prior to that, it was impossible to see him fight. I followed him in Ring Magazine. I followed him and what title fights and what fights he was winning and who he was beating. I followed him being on pound for pound lists and being one of the best fighters in the world. But as far as getting to see him, I was ignorant. I never got to actually get to see him fight. Unfortunately, back then, we did not have access to fights like we do today. Now there's no reason to be ignorant. There's no reason to act like you don't know who these smaller fighters are or these Asian fighters. Because this is a whole new fucking era, right? In 1990, nobody had cell phones. So it was very different. 1990, where was I in 1990? Oh, still in university. So, I was still following boxing, still paying attention to it. I remember the Pernell Whitaker, Julio Cesar Chavez fight fucking like it was yesterday. And what a robbery that was. Pernell Whitaker won that fight easily and was blatantly fucking robbed by making it a draw. But even back then, you had controversial fights and controversial results. People still give Pernell Whitaker full credit for beating Chavez in that fight, right? So when people talk about how Golovkin did beat Canelo Alvarez in the first fight, it's the exact same scenario. When people talk about Kovalev did beat Andre Ward the first fight, it's the exact same scenario. When people talk about how Lomachenko beat Devin Haney, it's the exact same scenario. These are fights that the majority of the population that watched them felt that the robbery was in place and the wrong fighter got the decision. No different, of course, than when Pernell Whitaker was robbed by Chavez. We look at these fighters on this list and we put it in context with today, right? Most of you guys don't know who Kosei Galaxy is, but he was a huge knockout puncher from Thailand. I guarantee you, if you go back and look at his resume looks like fucking garbage. compared to Junto Nakatani, Inui, and Kenshiro. I guarantee you, I don't even need to look at it, but I guarantee you he didn't fight nearly as many champions, and he didn't fight nearly as many top-level dudes in his career. Why? Because we know fighters from Thailand consistently have really fucking botched up shit fucking resumes, have huge amounts of fights, but so many of them are against really low-level competition. So you can go back and check Kosei Galaxy's resume just to confirm if I'm lying or if I'm telling you the truth. I'll even show you in this video so you can see for yourself. Then you think about Raul Perez. I guarantee you his resume is fucking not as good as Inui, Junto, or Kenshiro. He was never a 2 or 3 weight world champion. He was never unified in multiple divisions. He never fought 10 world champions in his career. Then you have Myung-Woo Gu. At one time, Korea used to be the dominant Asian country. They used to have tons of really legitimate Korean world champions. And now, of course, that's Japan that's representing. And you got to put this in context. Korea started boxing far earlier than Japan, right? They were really influenced from the Americans, probably, well, I don't know if it was earlier, but they had obviously a bigger impact from the American GIs, and obviously that really impacted them early on. I don't know what's happened in recent years and how Korea hasn't produced really anybody worth talking about, especially knowing that Korea is very super competitive, especially to Japan. So I'm sure they don't really dig that, but they must have good UFC fighters. And then, of course, you got Antonio Esperanza. Sorry if I'm butchering his name. I guarantee you his resume is not as good as Junto Nakatani, Kenshiro, or Inui. And at this point, he was ranked number 4 on this list. And just to put it in context, in 1991, he's no longer on the list. So he ended up losing. And I can't remember who he lost to. It might have been De La Hoya or somebody of that nature. Right. The next year, Kosei Galaxy is still on the list. Yu is no longer on the list, but a new Korean, Sung Kil Moon, is now on the list. So you still have 2 Asian fighters in the list at this point, and you still have Chavez, and the rest are basically black American fighters in 91. So in 91, they even have heavyweight Riddick Bowe on the list, right, along with, of course, Evander Holyfield, Meldrick Taylor, Terry Norris, Pernell Whitaker, James Buddy McGirt. James Buddy McGirt should never have been on a pound-for-pound list, and James Toney. So, that's the thing with pound-for-pound lists. You can see the consistency all the time. The next year, you end up having Orlando Gonzalez, a great Mexican-American fighter, on the list. This is a guy who wasn't on the list in 91, now all of a sudden is number 4 on the list in 92. Chavez is still number 1. Pernell Whitaker is still number 2. Now Julian Jackson's on the list, Moon is still on the list, and now Azuma Nelson has elevated himself onto this list. You can see the whole point with pound-for-pound lists. Throughout the years, fighters come, fighters go. It consistently changes, right? People aren't kept on this list because of historical fucking things that they did. The next year is even better. It puts things in more perspective for me. You have Michael Carbajal, who was obviously a U.S. Olympian, but a Mexican-American. Orlando Gonzalez, Ricardo Lopez, Roy Jones is now on the list, Kennedy McKinney's on the list, and Yuri Akaberkov. Sorry if I butchered his name. The first Eastern European fighter you will find on the list during these times. And literally that was in 1993. So it took until 1993 before you noticed Eastern European fighters on these lists. And that was because obviously Russia, like Cuba, were communist countries and didn't go professional. Their fighters and athletes were locked into these Cuban countries and not allowed to join professional ranks, right? But you think about Michael Carbajal. He was a U.S. Olympic gold medalist, right? A great small weight fighter. But his resume is not as good as Junto Nakatani's or Kenshiro Taraji's. Those guys aren't even finished their careers yet. You think about Ricardo Lopez, who's seen as one of the best Mexican fighters of all time, right? people underestimate him and look past him because they're ignorant, really. Uh, like John was talking about, fighters that are versatile. Well, then you should be talking about Ricardo Lopez. He was anything but the typical Mexican fighter, a guy that was on Don King fight cards all the time, and a guy that was revered, a guy that retired literally undefeated, 51-0-1, one draw, which was really a technical decision that should have been a no contest. So a guy that has a better record than Floyd Mayweather. Yet when you look at his overall resume, he was lacking names. He never went through multiple weight divisions. He didn't become undisputed. He didn't do the things that fighters today are doing that solidify them onto pound for pound lists, right? Then when you look at guys like Pernell Whitaker, I mean, you got Crawford that's doing what Pernell Whitaker did. You have James Toney, Holyfield, Roy Jones, Kennedy McKinney. Kennedy McKinney, you'd have to say that probably guys like Tank Davis, Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson are better than Kennedy McKinney. But McKinney was a U.S. Olympian, obviously had a big name and was pushed by, I think, the Duvas. So, he was getting a lot of television time and a lot of opportunity to showcase himself. And I think he was on this list after beating Barrera, I think. Of course, I'm just going off the top of my head. Right, but this shows you, historically, you've always had these small weight fighters on these pound for pound lists consistently, right? So there's nothing new now in 2025 that you didn't see in 1990 to 1995. You had tons of Asian fighters that were small weight fighters that Americans didn't even know who they were. You just started to see Eastern European fighters start to make the list, just as now the Berlin Wall had come down, and now obviously they had opportunities to fight professional, which they didn't have prior to that, right? You still had great American fighters on the list, but now you have less at this particular time. Not that this means consistently forever you're going to have not that many Americans on the list, but you can see there's ebbs and flows. There's times when there was 5 American fighters on the list, and then there's time where there was 8 Americans on the list, and it consistently changes and adjusts all the fucking time, because that's what these kind of lists do. Then you end up moving forward to 94, Whitaker, Jones, Gonzalez, Ricardo Lopez, right? Ricardo Lopez, if he was fighting today, guys like John Boxing and LDBC and Dante's Boxing Nation and all of these guys would be calling him a hype job, media created. They'd be shitting all over him. They'd be doing the exact same thing they do today with other fighters. Then you had Herberto Gonzalez, Frankie Randall, Trinidad, Gerald McKellen, Miguel Angel Gonzalez, and Kevin Kelly, right? No Asian fighters right now, but you still have tons of Mexican fighters, Mexican Americans, and just Mexican. The next year, Pernell Whitaker, Roy Jones, Ricardo Lopez, number 3. Oscar De La Hoya, number 4. Now he's starting to take over. De La Hoya, Yuri, and Costa Zoo, 2 Eastern Europeans now on the list. Riddick Bowe, Antonio Barrera, Terry Norris, right? 96, 97, obviously people are very familiar with this particular generation. If you want to talk about American dominance in modern boxing, it was probably more during these later 90s, right? When you had all those fighters from the 1984 Olympics, the 1988 Olympics, who really were showing out and showing up right there. And then 88, what year did Oscar De La Hoya come out? Not 88, but I guess the Olympics after that, 92. Obviously, you had Pernell Whitaker and Taylor and Evander Holyfield from 84. 88, I think, was Roy Jones, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Michael Carbajal. And then obviously it adjusted and changed. But you can see consistently small weight fighters are always on these lists. You go to 1999, Stevie Johnson, he's American, but a small weight fighter, right? Mark Johnson, small weight fighter. Ricardo Lopez, still there, right? Ricardo Lopez consistently on the pound for pound list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 8 years in a row. But I guarantee you, people would dismiss, downplay, and criticize his resume today. The same people that are trying to downplay, criticize Inui, Junto, and Kenshiro. And the irony is, you tried to play this game with Inui, and that shit blew up in your face and embarrassed you, made you look foolish by picking the black American fighter over him just because he was black. Ended up getting destroyed, but then went on to show you that he's a great fighter. But Inui was better. So now there's not much you can say, right? And the reality is, Junto and Kenshiro, we will see what they end up doing in their careers. We'll see if they go on to be the next Inui or go on to be the next, what's his face? Why can't I remember him? The 115-pound champion who just lost to Puma. Obviously a very good Japanese fighter, a 4-weight world champion. Has some great wins on his resume, but obviously has some losses in his resume as well. You know, wasn't seen as a Nui level type of fighter, but obviously is one of the best Japanese fighters of all time, right? So you have obviously different levels, especially for a country like Japan that doesn't have the legacy that, say, the States does. But there's no need to dismiss, downplay, and ignore foreign fighters and small weight fighters just to fucking try to hype up black American fighters. These black American fighters have every opportunity to showcase themselves and put themselves high on pound for pound lists. Tank Davis could have fought unification fights fucking for 8 years now, and still he hasn't done it. He could have fought great names, all those guys that were in and around his division since he moved up to 135. He hasn't done it. The one guy he did fight was really the cherry pick out of all of them, Ryan Garcia, right? No Haney, no Tio, no Loma, no Shakur. Where you get Ryan Garcia. Oh, congratulations, right? For Shakur, I mean, Shakur has done what he had to do. Unfortunately, he just hasn't got the names yet, right? And stylistically, he's underperformed in multiple fights, which is why people have been hesitant to put him on the list. Devin Haney was on the list and was high on the list. But then when you cherry pick a Ryan Garcia just to get a big payday following Tank Davis' footsteps, a guy that Tank Davis destroyed and you were equally supposed to destroy him, only to go in there and get fucking knocked down 4 times and hurt 6 times, it's no surprise people aren't very confident with you at the moment. Does this mean you can't put yourself back on the list? Of course it doesn't. You have a fight to become a 3-weight world champion against Brian Norman Jr. You beat Brian Norman Jr. to become a 3-weight world champion. I guarantee you, you're going to fucking catapult in to the top 6 of the pound for pound list. Right? And the irony is, you got guys like Kenshiro who literally have been calling out Bam Rodriguez. Right? That's a huge fight, and a fight probably he's going to lose. He'd have to move up from 112 pounds all the way to 115 to take Bam to move into his 3rd weight division to take on one of the fucking generational talents of this era. So the chances of him, especially now that he's like 32 years old, beating him, especially in a bigger weight division, it is tough work. But that's the kind of thing he's hoping to do. Junto, we know, is going to be fighting Inui if both of them come through unscathed for the rest of 2025 in early 2026 in the biggest fight card in Japanese boxing history. What these guys want to do, and what we want them to do, is fight the best fighters available to them. This is exactly what we want black American fighters to do as well. The difference is, for the most part, they just aren't doing it and don't even seem interested in doing it. At least Devin Haney has shown fucking some moxie to do it and has done it for the most part of his career. That's why he's gotten more credit than guys like Tank Davis and Shakur for the majority of his career. Tank Davis looks like he's fucking rather going to cherry pick a social media guy again. Shakur, who knows what's going to happen? Obviously, now that he had that great performance against Zepeda, you know that Turkey's going to be far more happy with his performance and far more inclined to continue to spend money on his career, which is a great thing for Shakur. It means opportunities are going to be available to him to continue to build his resume and make a name for himself. Let's see if Turkey can get Tank Davis and Shakur together to make that fight. It might not be the best fight in boxing as far as the style matchup, but it's a huge fight in boxing as far as legacy. As a boxing fan, at the end of the day, that's all we want to do. We want to see all these fighters get in the ring against the best competition available to them to prove how good they really are. And either they're going to really prove they're elite, historically great fighters, or they're going to prove that they were great fighters, but they stepped up maybe too much, or just bit off more than they can chew, or they're going to be exposed that they just weren't that great, and maybe they're getting more attention than they really deserved, or there may be something in between all of those things, right? You hate to paint with too broad of a brush when you're talking about fighters' careers, because people lose and people bounce back. Roberto Duran lost to fucking Kirkland, a UK fucking fighter that was nothing, and then bounced back with career fucking defining fights afterwards, right? I mean, historically, that shit's always happened. So you can't be too quick to dismiss fighters. What makes them great is what they do after a loss, right? But this video is just trying to shine some fucking education on ignorant fucking so-called boxing fans who are more focused on pushing out negativity and criticism towards fighters as opposed to just fucking embracing the sport of boxing as a whole. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments below, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.